Welcome to Shadows at Dusk. Dusk is not the end. It's the doorway between two worlds. A place where stories slip through, quiet, cold, and true. You've entered that space now, and what follows is meant for you. Stay in the shadow. I'd never imagined a room smelling faintly of stale cigarettes, and regret could morph into a personalized abyss. Yet here I was, crouched in the peeling confines of a motel bathroom, the scrape and click of a lock being picked, echoing like doom's own rhythm. It hammered home a chilling truth. The most ravenous wolves often wear the widest, emptiest smiles. My name is Arthur Finch. I navigate the arteries of the country peddling wares, a life lived in transit. A caricature, perhaps, the road-weary salesman, but it's the map of my days, town blurring into town, one threadbare lodging bleeding into the next. You acclimatize, or so the delusion went. It was a Tuesday, the breath of November sharp in the air, when the tired glow of the Lamplighter Inn snagged my attention. Its neon sign stuttered, a fractured constellation against the bruised twilight sky. Cheap lodging was the siren song, exhaustion the tide pulling me in after a day paved with refusals and shut doors. Behind the counter stood a man seemingly fossilized into the very structure, a relic from its optimistic, likely polyester-clad origins. His affability was a garment worn too tight, stretching thin over something ill-fitting beneath. Questions spilled out as he processed my arrival. "And what winds blow you to our quiet corner, Mr. Finch?" he inquired, a smile fixed like cracked porcelain, never quite warming his eyes. "Just passing through," I offered, aiming for the opacity of smoke. "Business calls in the next county." He performed a nod, a jerky, over-eager motion. Yes, we see your kind often, always chasing the horizon, eh? A solitary existence, I'd wager." A hollow laugh escaped me, a reflexive shield against his prying. Anything to reach the sanctuary of my room. It has its stretches of quiet, certainly, comes with the territory. He slid a tarnished brass key across the counter, a relic in this age of plastic cards. "Well, settle in comfortably now. Anything you require, anything at all, you just ask for Silas." Murmuring thanks, I retreated towards my assigned door, the man's invasive courtesy clinging like damp wool. The room fulfilled its low expectations, an aroma of dust and time, wallpaper blooming with faded, indeterminate patterns, a television screen scarred with the ghost of countless broadcasts. Yet the bed promised oblivion, its linen crisp enough. My travel case thudded to the floor. I collapsed onto the mattress, shoes still laced, succumbing instantly. Consciousness returned violently, yanked from slumber by a rapping at the door. Disoriented, adrift in the groggy space between sleep and waking, I navigated the small room. Silas stood framed in the doorway, that unsettlingly broad smile firmly in place. "Apologies for the disturbance, Mr. Finch," he purred, his tone devoid of actual regret. "Just doing my rounds. Couldn't help but notice your vehicle's looking a bit low on air. Flat tire, I suspect. Confusion fogged my mind, slowly yielding to a prickle of alarm. A flat? Impossible, I just arrived. How could? Oh, the roads around here, he interrupted, smooth as oil. They have a way of finding weaknesses. Tell you what, come have a look-see. I've a knack with automobiles. Might just get you sorted. Every nerve ending screamed caution, a primal klaxon warning me away. But the fog of sleep lingered, and the specter of being stranded at dawn proved a potent counter-argument. All right, I conceded, pulling on my jacket. Show me. We stepped into the night, the air biting at exposed skin. As we neared my sedan, a discrepancy snagged my attention. The tires stood firm, perfectly inflated. I pivoted towards Silas, words of query forming on my lips, just as a flicker of polished steel caught the meager light. Before comprehension could dawn, a blunt force slammed against my temple. The world became a dizzying vortex, then dissolved into utter blackness. I surfaced sluggishly, head throbbing with a brutal rhythm. Reality sharpened into focus. I was back inside the motel room, lashed to a straight-backed chair. Silas occupied the space before me, his grin now stripped of all pretense, revealing something purely predatory beneath. Ah, he chuckled, a dry, rasping sound. Our weary traveler returns to the land of the living. You know, Mr. Finch, and you salesmen, cut from the same trusting cloth, every one of you, so wonderfully easy to herd. Fear, cold and sharp, constricted my throat as the full horror of my predicament solidified. What is it you want? Silas's eyes held a disturbing fusion of avarice and derangement. Oh, it's less about my wants, more about your possessions. Salesmen, you see, always travel with a bit of cash, always something intriguing tucked away in those neat little cases. He drifted towards my luggage, his hands moving through my belongings with an unnerving familiarity. But it's more than just that, he mused, his tone unnervingly conversational. You're also convenient, always moving, never rooted. No one raises an alarm for days, sometimes weeks. A glacial dread seeped into my bones. The unspoken question hung heavy in the stale air. How many others? How many journeys had abruptly terminated within these four walls? While Silas rummaged, I strained against my restraints. The ropes bit deep, but the knot securing my right wrist yielded microscopically. If I could just gain a fraction more slack. Wouldn't waste your energy, Silas remarked casually, his back still turned. Tied enough knots in my time to know they hold. Panic surged, threatening to drown my reason. I fought it back, desperate for clarity, for an escape route. Listen, I began, striving for a steady cadence. This isn't necessary. Take the money. Take whatever you want. I won't say a word to anyone. Just let me walk away. Silas turned, regarding me with an expression of theatrical pity. Now, Mr. Finch, we both know that's not feasible. Can't have loose ends running off to the constabulary, can we? No, I'm afraid your particular road trip concludes here. He produced a knife, its blade wickedly curved, catching the dim lamplight. Don't fret, though. I pride myself on efficiency, not a monster, you understand. As he advanced, the knife held aloft, something primal ignited within me. Fueled by sheer, unadulterated terror, I hurled myself backward, chair and all. The crash reverberated through my frame, agony flaring, but the impact jarred the ropes. Silas lunged, a curse spitting from his lips, but I twisted away, my right hand suddenly free. My fingers closed around the heavy base of a bedside lamp. I swung it, a desperate arc fueled by adrenaline, connecting with Silas's skull with a sickening thud. He crumpled without a sound. For a breathless moment, I lay on the floor, lungs heaving, shockwaves pulsing through me. Then urgency propelled me. Moving with clumsy haste, limbs still half encumbered, I tore at the remaining ropes. Free, I snatched my wallet and keys, abandoning everything else. As I scrambled for the door, a low groan emanated from the figure on the floor. Silas was stirring. I burst from the room, sprinting across the cracked asphalt towards my car, keys fumbling in my trembling hand. Behind me, Silas bellowed, his heavy footfalls pounding closer. I flung myself into the driver's seat, jammed the key home, and slammed the accelerator. Gravel spat as the tires spun, finding purchase. In the rearview mirror, a fleeting image. Silas, standing illuminated in the motel's sickly glow, his face a mask of incandescent fury. I drove for what felt like an eternity, hands welded to the wheel by tremor and fear, eyes scanning the mirror for the inevitable pursuit. Only when the first tentative strokes of dawn painted the horizon did a fraction of the tension ease. I pulled into the anonymous bustle of a truck stop, my thoughts a frantic swarm. The police? I had to call them. Yet a paralyzing fear held me captive. What if Silas wasn't acting alone? What if the local authorities were entangled? Ultimately, the instinct for self-preservation won. I kept driving, pushing eastward, crossing state lines, pausing only for fuel and fleeting moments of restless unease. 3 states away, the accumulated terror finally outweighed the fear of disbelief. I found a police station. The detective who received my account listened intently, his expression hardening into grim recognition. "You're not the first," he stated flatly when I fell silent. "We've heard variations on this theme before, other travelers vanishing along these routes. But you're the first to escape, the first who can put a face to the name." The ensuing weeks were a blur of collaboration with law enforcement, reconstructing the nightmare, helping them weave the net around Silas and the Lamplighter Inn. My instincts had been chillingly accurate. It was an established operation, a gruesome enterprise preying on the transient. Silas was merely a component in a machine chewing up lives for years. The news of the arrest brought a surge of vindication, a weight momentarily lifted, yet the relief felt hollow, transient. The ordeal had irrevocably altered the landscape of my inner world. Returning to the road, to the life of perpetual motion and anonymous motel rooms, was inconceivable. The mere thought triggered a visceral dread I couldn't suppress. I sought refuge in routine, securing a local sales position, a job that returned me each night to the known comfort of my own bed. Yet sleep doesn't always offer sanctuary. In the quiet hours, the phantom chill of that room returns. I contemplate the thin membrane separating my fate from that of the others, the unluckier ones whose narratives were brutally concluded at the lamplighter. I see Silas's smile mirrored in countless benign faces. The world, I now understand, teems with predators cloaked in helpfulness, their smiles merely bait. It's a heavy knowledge to bear, but it has honed my senses, sharpened my caution. Some might label it paranoia. I know it as survival. The most insidious dangers rarely announce themselves with snarls. They often begin with a seemingly innocent query. How can I help you today? My escape from the Lamplighter Inn was a matter of brute luck and desperate instinct. The enduring struggle is navigating a world where trust feels like a reckless gamble. The lesson etched into my psyche is profound. Listen to the quiet tremor of unease, the internal whisper insisting, something here is profoundly wrong. Because sometimes the most critical transaction isn't closing the deal, but recognizing when you're the one being sold a fatal deception. The pulse of Providence Memorial Hospital at night was a quiet metronome, the soft sigh of ventilators, the hushed cadence of heart monitors, the whisper of crepe-soled shoes across polished floors. These were the familiar sounds accompanying my nocturnal rounds, the lonely rhythm of Elias, the custodian. An unsettling tranquility usually draped the corridors in the deepest hours, but one night that stillness fractured, revealing a darkness that snared me in its coils, casting me into a perilous shadow play. I recall the precise moment. A Wednesday dawn was creeping into the sky, though the clock insisted it was merely 3:17 a.m. The third floor, sterile and silent, was my domain. Mop, buffer, empty bins, a ritual bordering on trance. Then, through the periphery of my practiced motions, I registered an anomaly. Nurse Agnes Thorne, a woman built like a bulwark, her reputation equally formidable, hovered near the locked supply closet, her movements jerky, dissonant. Her head swiveled, scanning the empty hallway with an unnerving frequency. Even from my distance, I saw the tremor in her hands as they wrestled with the lock, the distinct sheen of perspiration beading on her brow despite the cool air. Intrigue, sort of sharp and unwelcome, pricked me. I feigned intense focus on a stubborn scuff mark near the nurse's station, my gaze subtly tethered to her silhouette. What unfolded next sent a chill spidering down my spine. Agnes slipped through the closet door, a furtive shadow swallowed by the small space. She emerged seconds later, her voluminous handbag visibly burdened, heavier than before. With swift, muffled footfalls, she retreated down the corridor, vanishing around the corner. A beat of silence, then another. I waited until the echo of her steps faded completely before drifting towards the supply closet. The door, improperly latched, yielded to my gentle push with a faint groan. Inside, the sterile order was disrupted. Stark gaps yawned on the shelves, where neat rows of medication vials should have stood. The truth struck me with the force of a physical blow. Agnes Thorne was pilfering hospital drugs. Why? For profit? Personal demons? The potential consequences cascaded through my mind. compromised patient care lives balanced precariously on her deceit. Action was imperative, yet uncertainty paralyzed me. Agnes commanded respect, years of service fortifying her position. Who would heed the word of a night custodian against hers? Doubt gnawed, but the image of those empty spaces, the potential harm, spurred me onward. I needed proof, undeniable and absolute. The following nights became a tense vigil. Agnes was shrewd, varying her methods, sometimes the supply closet, other times slipping vials directly from the emergency crash carts when backs were turned. My small notebook filled with meticulous entries, dates, times, estimated types, and quantities. Still, a knot of apprehension tightened in my gut. What if I misinterpreted? What if a benign explanation lay hidden beneath the surface? My hesitation nearly proved ruinous. Sunday night descended, heavy and charged. Seeking refuge and caffeine in the staff break room, I found the air instantly thicken as Agnes entered. The confined space pulsed with unspoken tension. "Agnes," I began, the name feeling foreign and heavy on my tongue, my voice striving for a steadiness I didn't feel. "The supply closet. I saw you." She froze, her gaze sharpening into glacial points. "What are you insinuating?" Drawing a breath that felt thin and inadequate, I pressed on. "The medication. I know you've been taking it several times this past week." A flush crept up her neck, darkening her features. A vein throbbed visibly at her temple. "You know nothing," she hissed, her voice dangerously low. "Keep your nose where it belongs." The atmosphere crackled, suffocating. Agnes radiated a volatile energy. Caution warred with conviction. "I can't ignore this," I stated, finding a surprising firmness within myself. "It has to be reported." Faster than I could anticipate, she lunged. Her hand clamped onto the collar of my work shirt, yanking me forward until her face was inches from mine, her breath hot and sharp against my skin. "You won't say a word," she snarled, raw menace in her eyes. "Breathe a syllable of this and you'll wish you hadn't." Fear, cold and visceral, clamped down hard. Her strength was startling. I twisted against her grip, a choked gasp escaping me. "Let go." My heart hammered against my ribs. For a fraction of a second, she paused, her narrowed eyes appraising me. Then, with sudden, brutal force, she shoved. I stumbled backward, colliding hard with the table. Pain flared along my spine as I hit the floor, the impact expelling the air from my lungs. Scrambling upright, adrenaline surging, I saw her advancing, her face a mask of fury. Escape was the only thought. Find help. Expose this before it consumed me entirely. I bolted, ignoring the throbbing ache in my side, the break room door swinging shut behind me. Down the hushed, dimly lit corridor I ran, my thoughts a frantic scramble. How to reveal Agnes's crime without inviting further retribution? The hospital felt vast and empty, the night staff sequestered behind closed doors. Rounding a corner, I nearly collided with Dr. Eris Thorne, a senior physician whose calm demeanor I'd often observed. He arched an eyebrow at my breathless, disheveled state. "Everything all right, Elias?" Concern softened his features. Hesitation flickered. Could I trust him? But the shadow of Agnes loomed large. "Doctor, I need your help," I urged, casting a nervous glance back down the hall. "It's about Nurse Thorne." Dr. Thorne guided me to a quieter alcove, his expression serious. "Tell me what's happened." With a deep, steadying breath, the words tumbled out, my voice still trembling slightly. "Agnes, she's stealing drugs from the supply closet, the crash carts. I've seen her. When I confronted her, she threatened me." I gestured vaguely towards my rumpled collar. "I don't know what else to do." His eyes widened, not with disbelief, but with dawning comprehension. "Are you certain?" His tone was grave. I nodded, a wave of relief washing over me. Someone was listening. I wrote it all down. Dates, times, what I saw. It's all here. I tapped the pocket where my notebook rested. Dr. Thorne nodded slowly, processing the information. "This needs reporting," he declared finally. "Immediately. But we proceed with caution. If what you say is true, she could be volatile." Together, we made our way to the hospital administrator's office. Dr. Thorne recounted the situation in low, urgent tones while I presented my notebook, its pages filled with my clandestine observations. The administrator listened, her face growing increasingly grim. "An immediate investigation will be launched," she stated, her voice resolute. "Thank you, Elias, for your courage in bringing this forward." The remaining hours of the night shift were electric with unspoken tension. I stayed near Dr. Thorne, the memory of Agnes's violence still fresh. Whispers circulated among the staff. Wary eyes followed me down the halls. As dawn broke, security personnel arrived. Agnes Thorne was escorted from Providence Memorial, her departure marked by furious shouts and struggles that echoed unnervingly through the corridors. I watched from a distance, a confusing mix of fear and vindication swirling within me. The immediate threat had passed, but her parting glare felt like a promise etched in the air. In the ensuing days, Providence Memorial implemented stringent new protocols for medication control. Security tightened. I received quiet commendations for my bravery, yet an undercurrent of unease remained. Agnes's parting snarls echoed in quiet moments. Every unexpected noise made me jump. Every long shadow seemed poised to coalesce into her vengeful form. I found myself habitually checking over my shoulder, half expecting her furious face to emerge from the gloom. Weeks bled into months. Gradually, the sharp edge of fear began to dull. The hospital found its rhythm again, and I, too, began to breathe more easily within its walls. Yet the experience had irrevocably altered my perception. This building was no longer merely a place I cleaned. It was a place where I had confronted corruption, stared down danger, and somehow prevailed. One evening, as my shift neared its end, Dr. Thorne found me polishing the brass plaque by the main entrance. "Elias," he said, resting a hand briefly on my shoulder, "I wanted to express my gratitude again. What you did, it took genuine courage. You likely prevented significant harm." A faint smile touched my lips. I nodded. "Just did what felt right, Doctor." Walking out into the nascent sunrise that morning, a quiet sense of pride settled over me. I'd begun this job as Elias, the night custodian, largely unseen, unheard. Now I had demonstrably impacted the hospital's integrity, protected the very people whose messes I tidied. Providence Memorial loomed behind me, its windows catching the nascent gold of dawn. It felt different now, not just bricks and mortar, but a testament to the idea that even the most unassuming individual can find strength when faced with wrongdoing. Driving home, weary but profoundly changed, I understood my role had shifted. It was more than wielding a mop, more than emptying bins. It was about guardianship, about vigilance. The night Agnes Thorne was exposed had been terrifying, yes, but it had also illuminated a resilience I hadn't known I possessed. I had stood firm, and in doing so, had not only helped safeguard the hospital, but had reshaped my own sense of self. As I finally sought sleep, the week's events replaying like a film reel behind my closed eyes, I knew my relationship with this job, with the night, was forever changed. My tools remained humble, yet they now symbolized something greater, a quiet commitment to defending the vulnerable, to upholding decency, whatever the cost. And as sleep claimed me, a curious thought surfaced. What other secrets did the shadowed hours hold? Whatever they might be, I felt a newfound readiness to meet them. Elias crested the hill, the cabin materializing like a phantom from the perpetual fogs. A nervous energy hummed beneath his skin as he emerged from the car, the saturated air instantly clinging, thick with the musk of sodden leaves. That long, hushed ascent had wound a tension deep into his sinews. His hands still bore the stiff imprint of the steering wheel. He nudged open the groaning wooden door, allowing the profound darkness within to swallow him whole for a beat, before illuminating the space with a single, naked overhead bulb. It was a cavernous main room, flanked by a diminutive kitchen alcove and a precipitous staircase spiraling towards a loft. Skeletal furniture hugged the walls, time-worn and expectant. His boots elicited mournful creaks from the floorboards with every step. The place felt not so much trashed as utterly forsaken. Depositing his duffel, Elias cautiously tested the chairs. One offered a precarious wobble. Dust lay thick as velvet on every surface, the air near the weeping windows tinged with the faint, earthy breath of mildew. A tentative swipe across a tabletop left his fingers coated in gray grime. In the kitchen nook, the faucet sputtered indignantly before yielding a hesitant trickle of water. The stove appeared archaic, the cupboards yawningly vacant, save for a few chipped plates and cups, surprisingly clean. Traversing the living area, his gaze fell upon the staircase. It climbed steeply, each riser emitting a small, sharp pop under pressure. He ascended into the loft, a cramped, low-ceilinged chamber housing only a naked bed frame. Beside it, another door, presumably accessing attic space or storage, stood stubbornly jammed. He didn't wrestle with it. Intrusion wasn't his purpose. Solitude was the prize he sought. Descending, he unfurled his sleeping bag near the stone hearth, beside which rested a modest stack of firewood. A quick inspection confirmed its dryness. Soon, a nascent fire crackled to life, its pops and snaps painting the room with a welcome, flickering warmth that kissed his face. His agenda was simple: several days adrift from distraction. Silence was his sanctuary, solitude his preference. The clamor of crowded places always set him on edge. Rest, perhaps some contemplative walks, a clearing of the mental clutter. He anticipated nothing more profound than quiet refuge. The initial day unfolded uneventfully. Elias traced the cabin's perimeter, internally mapping its quirks, checking window seals, arranging his meager provisions. Outside, the fog held its ground, an impenetrable curtain. As dusk bled into the landscape, he lit candles he'd brought, distrusting the cabin's dusty lanterns, preferring the manageable simplicity of wax and flame. That night, nestled in his sleeping bag near the hearth's dying embers, the room was cocooned in warmth. He listened intently for external sounds, hearing only the wind's ceaseless sigh and the sporadic fracture of a distant branch. Gradually, his eyelids grew heavy, the pull of sleep irresistible. It was then a subtle shift from above, a whisper of movement. Elias's eyes snapped open. The loft lay directly overhead, old wood contracting in the cold, he assured himself. Then it recurred, more defined this time, the distinct pressure of a footfall on a complaining board. He went utterly still, a frantic drumming commencing beneath his ribs, his gaze fixed on the shadowed ceiling, waiting. Seconds dripped by. Another step. A slow, deliberate creak followed. He swallowed against a rising tightness. Just the wind, he insisted silently, the structure settling. He stared until his eyes ached, but the loft remained quiescent. Eventually, sheer exhaustion claimed him. Morning found him stiff-necked, the fire extinguished, his breath pluming in the chill air. Sitting up, he scanned the cabin. Everything remained precisely as he'd left it. No disturbance marred the dust, no sign of forced entry. He attempted to shake off the lingering unease. Opening the front door invited a blast of damp air. The fog remained dense, swallowing the treetops whole. Moisture beaded instantly on his jacket. The wind carried a raw edge that made his eyes water. He decided on a brief reconnaissance around the cabin's exterior. The earth yielded softly beneath his boots, sodden and dark. He listened to the wind soughing through unseen branches, noting the profound absence of birdsong. It felt as though the world itself held its breath. Back inside, he coaxed the ancient stove into brewing coffee, its flame hissing softly. Seated at the table, sipping the bitter liquid from a chipped mug, the night's disturbances replayed themselves. Part of him yearned to dismiss them as figments of isolation, yet another part meticulously examined each remembered sound. Finishing his coffee, he began a cursory tidying, wiping dust from surfaces, rechecking the window frames, damp but secure. Activity, he hoped, would quell the rising tide of anxiety. Throughout that afternoon, the cabin itself seemed to murmur. Soft popping sounds emanated intermittently from the walls, wood reacting to temperature shifts, he rationalized. The floors groaned under his weight, expectedly, but occasionally a different sound surfaced, almost a sigh, a brief, quiet exhalation, seeming to drift from the room's shadowed corners. Each time he paused, listening intently, the cabin felt possessed of its own secret respiration. His eyes flickered, scanning, but no source revealed itself. He forced his attention onto practicalities, trying the small radio he'd packed. Only static answered. He consumed some canned rations, planning a simple evening meal. By nightfall, a more substantial fire roared in the hearth. He lit his candles, placing them about the room like small, flickering wards. The soft illumination sent shadows reeling across the timber walls. He settled near the fire, attempting to lose himself in an old magazine discovered in a drawer, its pages yellowed, its articles dated echoes. But his focus frayed. His gaze persistently strayed, probing the gloom, anticipating something. The wind buffeted the cabin. The fire flared and spat. After a time, he stood, stretching cramped muscles, eyes weary from reading. Bedtime. He unrolled the sleeping bag again, placing a lit candle on a low stool beside him, a meager, perhaps reckless beacon against the dark. His eyelids drooped. Sleep hovered close. Then an almost imperceptible shift in the room's atmosphere. The candle flame wavered violently. The walls emitted a low groan, and a deeper resonance shuddered from somewhere overhead. His heart hammered against his ribs. Bolting upright, he scanned the room. The candle on the stool extinguished abruptly. He rubbed his eyes, vision struggling to penetrate the sudden dark, pierced only by the faint, ruddy glow of the fireplace embers. A visceral chill traced paths across his arms. The wind rattled the window panes. Yes, but this felt different, internal. His pulse surged slowly, deliberately. Using the floor for balance, he rose. His breathing grew shallow, rapid. His mouth turned to dust. Then, a scraping sound dragged itself across the loft floor, evocative of a chair leg being pulled across bare wood. Elias found himself drawn to the base of the stairs, staring upwards into absolute blackness. He stood frozen, listening. A faint, shuffling movement whispered across the boards above him. Slow, measured footsteps. Lightheadedness threatened, but he compelled his voice into the silence. A cracked, tentative greeting, hoping against hope it was mere imagination. No response came. His throat constricted, legs trembling, he backed away, retreating to the relative sanctuary of his sleeping bag. He sat there, cocooned, eyes fixed on the stairwell until once again, oblivion born of sheer mental fatigue overtook him. The following dawn brought the same pervasive chill. His back protested night on the hard floor. Rising, he chafed his arms, trying to restore circulation. A glance towards the stairs revealed nothing amiss. The candle on the stool bore a solidified river of wax down its side. He moved to the hearth, poking listlessly at the gray ashes. His mind relentlessly replayed the sounds from the loft, not imagined. He had heard footsteps. The day passed under a pall of nervous tension. He forced down bread and more tinned food. He compelled himself outside again, venturing further despite the tenacious fog. The cabin's silhouette vanished quickly behind him as he navigated the hillside. Trees pressed close, their trunks slick and dark. The silence was profound, broken only by the wind stirring unseen branches, and once the distant crack of a falling limb. He walked until disorientation set in, a knot of panic tightening in his chest, forcing a hurried retreat. Sighting the cabin again brought a perverse sense of relief, quickly soured by the unease it radiated. Late afternoon saw the temperature plummet. Shivering even within his jacket, Elias rebuilt the fire. While the flames took hold, he prowled the cabin's interior, scrutinizing every corner. He opened cabinets, peered beneath the ancient furniture, even renewed his assault on the loft door. It remained immovably stuck, resisting as if braced from the other side. His muscles strained against the unyielding wood, his palm growing clammy on the knob. Defeated, he stepped back, breathing heavily, consciously suppressing thoughts of what might lie beyond. That evening, he deployed more candles, one sentinel at the stairbase, another on the table, a third near his sleeping bag. Light, he reasoned, equated to safety. He sat before the fire, watching the hypnotic dance of flames, his mind a whirlwind of conjecture. A hidden animal? A clandestine intruder? Or was his own sanity fraying at the edges? He fought sleep, determined to remain vigilant. Around midnight, the candle flames began to stutter in unison. The air grew heavy, dense. Then, distinctly, a whisper brushed against the edge of his hearing. His own name, Elias, breathed softly, seeming to emanate from the very walls around him. Every muscle locked. He scanned the room, seeking a draft, finding none. The cabin felt hermetically sealed, yet the whisper felt intimate, immediate, as if spoken directly beside his ear. He surged to his feet, legs nearly buckling. His heart pounded a frantic rhythm. He spoke aloud, the words lost to memory, perhaps a challenge, perhaps a plea for it to cease. Instantly, the candle on the table winked out. The flame near the stairs guttered, then died. The fine hairs on his arms prickled erect. Clutching the final candle, his hand trembled, setting the small flame into a wild dance. A floorboard creaked directly behind him. His stomach plummeted. He spun around, seeing nothing but deeper darkness where the firelight didn't reach. Yet he felt it, a presence, moving stealthily across the room. His mouth was utterly dry. He retreated instinctively until his back met the cold wall. His mind screamed, "Run!" Flee out the front door, but his body remained leaden, paralyzed. Pressed against the rough timber, the final candle flickered once, twice, then surrendered, plunging him into absolute blackness. His own ragged breathing filled the void, loud against the frantic thumping in his chest. The room seemed alive now, filled with infinitesimal clicks and creaks from every direction. Faintly, he thought he detected breathing, shallow and slow, that wasn't his own. Reaching out blindly, his fingers brushed the back of a chair. He gripped it, anchoring himself against a wave of dizziness. After an eternity, his fumbling hand found the lighter in his pocket. Thumb-scraping flint, a tiny flame sprang forth, pushing back the oppressive dark by mere feet. Stumbling towards the hearth, he managed to coax the embers with slivers of kindling. A fragile flame caught, grew. He knelt there, lighter still clutched tight, every nerve frayed. He listened, straining for any sound beyond the fire's growing crackle. Minutes crawled by. The sense of presence remained palpable, terrifyingly close, yet unseen. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the room's chill. Gradually, the immediate tension seemed to recede slightly. The fire cast a more confident, warm glow around him. He rose, knees unsteady, and swept his gaze towards the stairs. Empty. The front door remained shut. Wiping his brow, he fought to regulate his breathing. His hands felt slick. Retrieving his flashlight from beside the sleeping bag, he thumbed it on. The beam sliced through the gloom. He played it across the floor, the walls. Nothing disturbed. No footprints. No marks. His teeth began to chatter, a combination of cold and residual terror. Sleep was impossible that night. He sat with his back against the hearth's warm stones, flashlight clutched in one hand, lighter in the other. Periodically, the flames would dip, demanding more wood. His nerves were abraded raw. Every settling groan of the cabin made him jump. The whispering persisted, intermittent, never quite coherent, like distant voices calling his name, sometimes from within the walls, sometimes seeming to drift down from the loft. His scalp tingled with each recurrence. He anchored himself with the tangible sensations, the fire's heat, the scent of burning pine. Morning arrived not with relief, but with a gray, weary resignation. The pallid light filtering through the windows rendered the cabin's interior starkly visible. He forced himself to eat, his stomach churning, swallowing difficult. His hands shook too violently to hold a mug steady. A decision had crystallized. He had to leave. Part of him felt defeated, chased away. Another part recognized the cabin wasn't offering refuge, but antagonism. He remembered seeking peace and finding only this escalating dread. He began packing with methodical haste, folding the sleeping bag, gathering candle stubs, clearing away his refuse. The cabin seemed to watch, its silence charged. The prickling sensation on his neck intensified. He resisted the constant urge to look over his shoulder. Staying longer felt perilous, a surrender to the encroaching strangeness that threatened to unravel him completely. The feeling of unseen movement behind the walls, beneath the floors, was now a constant companion. Outside, loading the car, the air was bitingly cold, wet. The fog clung stubbornly to the slopes. Closing the trunk, he cast a final look back at the cabin. Its aged wood and the swirling mist blurred its lines, rendering it indistinct, almost dreamlike. He slid into the driver's seat, turned the key. A final surge of anxiety clenched his chest, the turning ignition feeling like an irrevocable act. Perspiration slicked his temples. He reversed, pointing the car down the treacherous track. Driving away, he kept his eyes fixed on the path ahead, the fog billowing across the road like spectral curtains. One involuntary glance in the rearview mirror showed the cabin's roofline receding, dissolving into the gray void. His mouth remained arid, his knuckles bone white on the wheel. He pressed onward, needing distance, needing escape. The voices were gone now, but the frantic cadence in his chest remained. An unsettling conviction lingered that the cabin's oppressive presence wasn't entirely left behind, but waited, perhaps, just around the next shrouded curve. Only when he descended far enough for the air to thin, for patches of bruised sky to appear, did his muscles begin to unclench. The tension eased fractionally from his shoulders. His breathing steadied. He realized how infrequently he'd blinked. Taking slow, deliberate breaths, he focused solely on the road. By the time he reached the main highway, sensation had returned to his numb fingers. A profound, bone-deep exhaustion settled over him, his eyes burning from sleeplessness. He swore never to return. No more nights listening to phantom footfalls in the loft. No more whispered invitations from the walls. No more sensing that silent, watchful entity pacing just beyond the firelight. The retreat he'd envisioned had warped into something else entirely, the cabin drawing him not into peace, but into a taut, unnerving intimacy with fear itself. Even now, safe on the open road, the dark corners persisted in his mind's eye, the sound of creaking boards overhead an indelible echo. He couldn't shake the feeling of having been observed, studied by something ancient and unseen in the dark. The cabin had released him physically, yet a sliver of its presence remained lodged deep within, patiently waiting. He had no intention of ever answering its silent summons again. My own flesh, a cage, that's what sleep paralysis felt like. Long before it arrived, these episodes were torment enough. Night would fracture, consciousness returning to find limbs leaden, unresponsive, my gaze pinned to the indifferent plaster overhead. A crushing weight bore down, not physical, yet undeniably real. Betrayal, sharp and personal. Liberation came eventually, a violent shudder ripping me free. I'd surge upright, breath tearing through my lungs, slick sweat cooling rapidly on my skin. The frantic rhythm of my heart a drum against silence. That, at least, was familiar territory. But several moons ago, the script changed. The solitude of my paralysis ruptured. A nascent awareness bloomed at the periphery, a presence, dense and watchful, occupying the space beside my bed. And since that dawning horror, the feeling has never truly retreated. Elias, that's the name I answer to. Alone, I inhabit a compact, single-bedroom flat, nested on the second floor of a building whose bones groan with age. Its arteries are narrow corridors, and its voice the complaining creak of floorboards underfoot. Night amplifies every sigh and murmur, plumbing weeping within the walls, the muffled choreography of unseen neighbors. 2 years I've called this place home. The paralysis predates my arrival, a known devil. Yet roughly 90 nights passed, everything warped. That particular evening found me adrift in the liminal space between wakefulness and sleep. The familiar viscosity crept into my muscles, a slow drowning. Eyelids sealed, yet awareness remained, sharp and unwelcome. This prescient chill always heralded the ordeal, the tightening vice around my chest, the utter refusal of my arms to obey. Even a command sent to my toes dissolved into numb static, standard procedure. But then a deviation. A definite pressure materialized near my feet, subtle as a resting hand upon the quilt. Then it intensified, becoming a tangible burden. A desperate command. Open your eyes. Futile. My heart became a frantic bird against my ribs, breath hitched, shallow and inadequate. The weight was undeniable. I felt the distinct depression of the mattress yielding beneath it. With a surge of will, my eyelids fluttered open. Vision swam, fractured by the paralysis. The world resolved into stark geometries of shadow and faint light. Yet something sat silhouetted at the bed's edge, tall, slender, anthropomorphic, yet utterly alien. Its head inclined, aimed directly at me, though no features resolved in the gloom. A low, resonant thrumming emanated from it, not a growl, not precisely, but a deep, visceral vibration that seemed to hum through the very air. A scream clawed at my throat, silent, impotent, my tongue a dead weight. Then, abruptly as it began, the paralysis shattered. Limbs convulsed, freedom returned in a jarring rush. The pressure vanished. I bolted upright, sheets clinging like a damp shroud, the echo of my heart's frantic tempo deafening. Fumbling, I ignited the bedside lamp, its sudden glare illuminating nothing. The foot of the bed was empty, yet the room felt charged, imprinted with that uncanny presence. My hands trembled violently. My mouth was desert dry. Sleep that night was a lost country. That was the genesis, the moment the possibility solidified. I was not alone here. In the ensuing weeks, the visitation became ritual. Night after night, the familiar binding, the waking into immobility, and the inevitable appearance of that lank, featureless silhouette. Sometimes perched at the bed's boundary, sometimes a sentinel in the room's far corner. Never a face, just an unnerving void atop an elongated neck, shoulders sloping oddly downwards. And always that deep, resonant hum, a sound that felt less like noise and more like a physical wave washing over me, pregnant with some unknowable intent. 2 weeks into this nightly siege, I began actively fleeing my bed. Late hours bled into early morning, seeking refuge on the living room couch, the television's flickering glow a flimsy shield. It proved porous. Drifting off near 1 a.m., I awoke to the dreaded stasis, eyes open, body inert. The TV screen, now a blank, passive gray in standby mode, offered no comfort in the deepened gloom. Then, the telltale compression of the cushions beside me. A slow turn of my eyes, the only movement permitted, revealed it. The shape, you're now sharing the couch, inclined towards me. That vibration pulsed in my ears, insistent as a distant idling engine. My pulse hammered at my temples. A phantom command urged my hand to push, to repel, but my body remained a treacherous statue. The release, when it came, left me gasping, the phantom weight lingering on the cushions. Fear, no longer confined to the bedroom, metastasized. This presence wasn't merely tied to a place, it felt tethered to me. In the stark fluorescence of the kitchen, cold water splashed on my face did little to quell the internal tremor. I stood there, lights blazing, for what felt like an age, skin clammy, stomach churning. Every creak from the hallway sent jolts through my system. Peripheral flickers became suspect. Tricks of light or something more. The boundary between perception and paranoia grew terrifyingly thin. Days blurred into a sleepless haze. Even when sleep offered brief respite, the paralysis and its attendant visitor were guaranteed. But the terror now seeped into daylight. The feeling of being watched became a constant companion. Walking through my own apartment felt like navigating hostile territory. I'd catch myself glancing compulsively at shadowed corners, expecting something. A silhouette? A shift in the density of the air? It was never definitive, yet the sensation, the certainty of observation, clung relentlessly. My attempts at defense felt pitifully inadequate. Extra lamps bloomed in the living room, banishing shadows only to create new, dancing ones. The bedroom door stayed open, a futile gesture towards vigilance. The brighter I made the space, the more the darkness seemed to coalesce just beyond the light's reach. Every bulb's flicker, every reflection caught in a window pane, tightened the knot in my gut. Nights devolved into a miserable cycle. Anxious wakefulness, fraught half-sleep, violent awakenings. One twilight, as desperation spurred a new tactic. My phone, mounted on a tripod, aimed at the bed. Record pressed. Proof. That's what I craved. Objective validation that this wasn't merely fractured psyche. If the lens captured it, then I wasn't unmoored from reality. Sleep, when it finally came after midnight, was a surrender born of exhaustion. Thoughts chasing each other in frantic circles until oblivion claimed me. Consciousness returned like a physical blow, the suffocating pressure pinning me down, arms like stone, mouth sealed shut, eyes fixed skyward. That deep, resonant thrum vibrated through my bones. A strained scan of the room, head immobile, finally located it, pressed against the far wall near the closet. Impossibly tall, its apex grazing the ceiling. The featureless void that served as its face was trained on me. The hum intensified, seeming to resonate within my skull. A glacial coldness touched my arms, a phantom chill tracing my skin. Tears welled, blurring the scene further, my eyes stinging from the inability to blink freely. My heart hammered, a frantic prisoner in my chest. Then, a shift. The figure detached from the wall, taking a distinct step towards the bed. It leaned, elongated, its presence eclipsing the room, looming directly above me. Breath ceased, a final desperate surge of will against unresponsive muscles, useless. It hovered there, an eternity compressed into seconds, until the release finally came, the body's involuntary spasm breaking the spell. I launched myself upright, gulping air like a drowning man. Phone snatched, fingers clumsy, trembling so hard I nearly dropped it. Playback. The small screen showed only me, quiescent in bed, an occasional twitch the only sign of life. The room, empty. No towering presence by the closet, no spectral visitor, no shift in the mundane play of light and shadow. Just me, apparently sleeping. A cold wave washed over me, disappointment sharp as a glass, overlaid with a deeper, more insidious fear. What I had seen, what I had felt, was absolute. Yet the recording offered stark negation. The ground felt unstable beneath me. Was my own mind the true antagonist? The erosion showed publicly. My boss inquired, concern etched on his face, about the bruised hollows under my eyes, the fractured focus I brought to simple tasks. Colleagues cast worried glances when my gaze drifted unfocused during meetings. I found myself checking over my shoulder, even in the brightly lit office, a ridiculous tic born of the terror that the figure might transgress the boundary between night and day, home and work. Sleep deprivation hummed in my skull, a constant low-grade headache. My hands shook erratically as I typed. Even mundane rituals like fetching coffee became fraught. My own reflection in the machine's polished surface seemed poised to reveal that faceless shape lurking just behind me. Back within my besieged walls, I experimented futilely. Different sleeping positions, extra pillows propping my head, shifting the bed's location closer to the door, then away, pointless exercises. Every surrender to sleep, even a brief daytime doze, invited the presence, sometimes seated, sometimes hovering, sometimes heralded by its arrival in the hallway outside my room, always accompanied by that low, almost mechanical rumble. On occasion, a faint rasping layered beneath the hum, like the dry friction of attempted words, syllables lost before formation, utterly unintelligible. One night I surfaced from deep slumber cleanly, without the usual paralysis. A flicker of relief, instantly extinguished by a profound sense of unease. The bedroom was swallowed by darkness, the air stagnant, heavy. My hand groped for the bedside lamp. Before my fingers found the switch, a definite shift in the corner snagged my attention. I froze, instinct warring with reason. Don't look. Turn on the light, now. My hand brushed the switch, light flooded the room. For the briefest fraction of a second, an imprint remained on my retina, a tall, attenuated form pressed flat against the wall, then gone. The corner stood empty. My breath came in ragged bursts. Blink. Look again. Oh, nothing. I remained sitting, bathed in the lamp's glare, hugging my knees, willing the frantic cadence of my heart to slow. The fear felt constant now, untethered from the paralysis itself. That near miss pushed me further. Fearing my own unraveling, I waged a war against darkness. Lights blazed in every room. A standing lamp became a permanent fixture in the hallway, burning through the night. My electricity bill soared. I barely registered the cost. The television became a constant companion, its drone filling the living room day and night, a flimsy bulwark against silence. Yet the presence endured. Shadows writhed at the edge of vision. A walk from kitchen to bedroom felt like wading through unseen currents, the distinct impression of being followed dogging my steps. Stopping abruptly, I'd half expect the solid impact of collision with something unseen, hovering just inches away. Appetite withered. My hands trembled too much for complex cooking. Meals became exercises in minimal effort. Canned soup, microwaved remnants. The simple act felt fraught with tension. I scanned the kitchen constantly, ears straining for the low hum that signaled its proximity. More than once, a sound from the extractor fan vent above the stove seemed to mimic it, only for me to identify the prosaic groan of the refrigerator's motor kicking in. Or so I desperately tried to convince myself. The situation deteriorated to the point where I dragged a small television into the bedroom itself, letting its ceaseless chatter and flickering light fill the space all night. A desperate hope that constant sensory input might disrupt the descent into that vulnerable half-state where the entity manifested. It offered temporary, fragmented relief. Sleep would come, only to be shattered 2 or 3 hours later by the familiar leaden weight in my limbs. And there it would be, inevitably, standing sentinel by the door or looming at the foot of the bed, eyes stinging, jaw aching from unconscious clenching, body straining against invisible bonds. Then the jolt awake, the TV still babbling inanely, its shifting light reflecting on my sweat-streaked face. No sanctuary existed. No strategy prevailed. This visitor could not be deterred. One afternoon, cocooned in the living room, blinds drawn against the indifferent sun, I surfed channels numbly. A dull ache throbbed behind my eyes, the signature of profound exhaustion. It was mid-afternoon, perhaps 3 o'clock, yet I felt hollowed out, sleep-starved for days. Just a moment, I reasoned. A brief respite on the couch. Surely daylight offered some protection. I leaned back, surrendering to the cushion's embrace. How long I slept, I cannot say. Awareness returned, heralded by the low, resonant rumble, closer now, more intimate than ever before. Eyes sealed, body locked. Panic flared, my wrists gave a useless twitch. The hum intensified, vibrating through the couch frame, and then contact. Something brushed against my ankle, a distinct pressure, cold and deliberate, like fingers closing around my leg. Terror choked me. A silent scream lodged in my throat. Forcing my eyelids open, a crack revealed the shape bending over me, reaching. No face, but the focus of its attention was palpable, terrifying. My chest felt ready to burst. It leaned closer, the chill presence almost touching my forehead. A wave of cold washed over my face. And then, the familiar snap, the violent reclaiming of my body. I lurched forward, nearly tumbling to the floor, heart slamming against my ribs like a trapped bird. Gasping, I scrambled for the remote, bathing the room in artificial light. I sat there, trembling, staring fixedly at the spot where it had stood. The air itself felt thick, difficult to draw into my lungs. That corner of the room appeared perfectly ordinary, empty, yet the psychic residue was undeniable. The feeling of it remained, potent and patient, simply waiting for my next moment of vulnerability, my next lapse in vigilance, waiting for me to close my eyes. Now I anticipate this presence in every silence, every shadowed space. It's no longer confined to the paralysis. I feel its gaze when fully awake, navigating the dim passage to the bathroom, studying the empty corners of the kitchen. A flicker in the mirror becomes suspect. My own movement, surely, yet the doubt lingers. The tension is a physical thing, knotting my muscles, slicking my palms. I remain perpetually braced. Sharing this burden feels impossible. A friend visited once, noted the excessive illumination. I deflected with a mumbled lie about faulty wiring. He accepted it easily. How could I articulate the truth? That I am haunted by a featureless specter, born of sleep's paralysis but now bleeding into wakefulness. A silent watcher whose weight I feel upon my bed. The words themselves sound like madness, but the feeling, the sight, the low thrumming sound, these are my constants. They are real enough to anchor my terror. Each night unfolds as a grueling campaign. I resist sleep, pushing consciousness to its ragged edge until exhaustion inevitably claims victory. Awakening is violent, cold sweat, heart pounding a frantic rhythm. Sometimes I find myself standing disoriented in the hallway with no memory of leaving the bed. Other times, the TV's glare and the room's excessive lights greet my return to awareness, the lingering adrenaline suggesting a chase just concluded on the edge of dreaming. But the figure persists, a constant background presence, silent save for that deep vibration, the resonant hum that scores the fragile territory of my sleep. Upon waking each dawn, my first act is a ritual survey. The room's corners scanned, the foot of the bed inspected, a search for absence, a hope for reprieve. But the feeling endures, the certainty of being watched. I inhabit a state of perpetual tension, every muscle coiled tight, shoulders aching from the constant strain. Small sounds make me jump. The low hum echoes in my ears, triggered by the slightest resonance. Its motives remain opaque, its origins unknown. I understand only its unwavering persistence, its refusal to grant me peace. This is my landscape now. The question of its objective reality has become irrelevant. It is real enough to shape my existence, to infuse every shallow breath with fear. I wake, I perceive it. I sleep, I feel its weight. There is no exit. I have arrived at a kind of bleak acceptance. This may simply be the way things are. So I navigate each day, checking the shadows, leaving the lights burning, bracing for the next instance when my body betrays me, locking me in place as that tall, faceless shape materializes once more. If there is a way to end this, I haven't found it. For now, survival means simply holding the fragments together. That is the extent of my power, and perhaps the extent of everything. The city had gnawed at Ilara, its relentless rhythm wearing her down to a raw nerve. Escape wasn't a luxury, it was a tourniquet for the soul. She craved an absence of demands, of faces, of the incessant urban hum. Thus the cabin, a pinprick on a map swallowed by miles of forest green, secured with weeks of scrimped savings. No signal bars, no nearby chimneys puffing smoke, just Ilara and the ancient congregation of trees, a promise of stillness, a space to simply exist. The journey itself felt like shedding layers of noise. Pavement gave way to gravel, then to a deeply rutted dirt track that coiled ever deeper into the woods, a path rarely troubled by tires. The world outside the windshield grew dense, primal. When the cabin finally materialized in a small clearing, it was little more than a timber box, snug, self-contained with a bed, a rudimentary kitchen, a necessary bath. Its porch surveyed a sea of trunks and canopies stretching into hazy infinity. Perfection, Ilara thought, breathing air that tasted clean and wild. That initial day unfolded like a dream of tranquility. Her phone lay dormant, entombed in her bag. She wandered aimless paths, woven between ferns and fallen logs, the profound silence settling over her, a balm to her frayed senses. Thought, unburdened, began to flow clearly. As dusk painted the sky in bruised purples, she coaxed a small fire to life outside, its crackle the only counterpoint to the sibilant whisper of wind through the high branches. Dinner was simple, eaten under a burgeoning net of stars. Later, cocooned inside, the bolt slid home with a satisfying thud. She surrendered to sleep, more profoundly relaxed than she'd been in an age. Morning arrived crisp and bright, yet something felt subtly altered. Pushing open the cabin door, Ilara spotted it immediately. A plain fold of paper resting innocuously on the porch floorboards. A stray scrap, perhaps, carried by the breeze. She stooped, picked it up, unfolded it. The words, stark and simple script, landed like stones in her gut. Saw you by the fire last night. A paralysis seized her. She stood frozen, the note clutched tight, her mind scrabbling for benign explanations. A lost hiker? A bizarre joke? But the isolation was absolute. She hadn't glimpsed another human since leaving the highway. Her gaze swept the encircling trees, searching for movement, finding only the impassive woods, hearing only the indifferent wind. Retreating inside, the lock clicking sharply behind her, She fought to dispel the unease. A prankster, surely. Someone passing through, unseen. She tucked the note away, deep within a drawer, brewed coffee with hands that weren't quite steady, determined not to let this phantom ruin her refuge. Yet the peace had fractured. The forest, once a comfort, now seemed watchful. Every creak of the cabin timbers, every snap of a distant twig sent jolts through her system. Windows became portals she couldn't stop glancing towards. The porch felt exposed, vulnerable, but always there was nothing. Only the trees, standing sentinel in their vast, silent kingdom. Nightfall brought a heightened vigilance. She checked the door lock, then the window latches, rituals performed with a new, unwelcome gravity. In the suffocating dark of the small bedroom, sleep remained elusive. She lay rigid, ears straining against the silence, parsing every nocturnal murmur of the woods. "It's nothing," she told herself repeatedly, a mantra against the rising tide of fear. "Just nerves." But the image persisted, someone out there, close enough to observe her small fire, close enough to leave a message undetected. The next dawn, she hesitated before confronting the porch, a knot of dread tightening in her stomach. Steeling herself, she opened the door and saw it. Another note. This one wasn't dropped haphazardly. It was propped against the railing, deliberate, almost mocking. Her fingers trembled as she reached for it. "Watched you test the locks." The air turned to ice in her lungs. Whoever this was, their proximity was no longer passive observation. They knew her actions, her anxieties. Frantically, she scanned the tree line again, the silent green wall that offered no answers, no glimpse of the watcher. Just her, the cabin, and the vast, unnerving emptiness. Back inside, the lock secured once more, panic began to bubble. Leave? Call for help? The phone remained a useless brick. The car felt impossibly far, the treacherous road back a daunting prospect. Just a cruel game, her rational mind insisted, but the visceral certainty of being hunted grew stronger, colder. The remainder of the day dissolved into a tense vigil by the windows, watching the unchanging woods, waiting for a sign, a movement, anything. Nothing stirred but the leaves and the occasional breeze. Exhaustion warred with terror as darkness reclaimed the forest. Sleep seemed impossible. Ilara sat bolt upright in bed for hours, the single lamp casting long, dancing shadows, every sound amplified. Eventually, sometime in the abyss before dawn, fatigue claimed her. She surfaced groggily to the first pale light filtering through the window pane. A fleeting moment of relief. Perhaps it was imagination, fevered nerves. Then a soft thumpy from outside, distinct on the porch boards. Heart hammering against her ribs, she crept to the window, peered through the edge of the curtain. Another white square lay directly before the door. She didn't want to know, didn't want to read the inevitable escalation, but compulsion won. With shaking hands, she unbolted the door, snatched the paper, retreated, unfolded it. Didn't rest easy, did you? Her mind fractured, closer, bolder. They'd been right there, just outside, while she slept fitfully within, watching, listening. Again, the desperate scan of the clearing yielded nothing but trees. Enough. The money, the lost piece, none of it mattered now. only escape. She moved with frantic energy, stuffing belongings haphazardly into her bag, clothes crumpled, toiletries forgotten. Get out before they decided the notes weren't enough. Reaching under the low bed frame for a stray boot, her fingers brushed against something else, paper, crumpled, tucked into the dusty shadows. A visceral wave of nausea washed over her as she pulled it free, smoothed it open with trembling digits. You look exhausted. The floor seemed to tilt. They had been inside the cabin, while she slept, mere feet away, close enough to see her face, close enough to hide this final, intimate violation. Breathing became a conscious, painful effort. Packing ceased. Keys were fumbled for, the door locked behind her in a gesture of pure, futile habit. She sprinted to the car, the ignition catching on the second, terrifying try. Tires spat dirt as she reversed violently, wrenching the wheel, aiming the car down the winding track. She flew down that road, a reckless, panicked flight, glancing constantly in the rearview mirror, half expecting a figure to emerge from the trees, standing silhouetted against the receding wilderness. But there was only the dust cloud billowing behind her, the endless trees, the empty road. She didn't ease her foot off the accelerator until the blessed sight of the main highway appeared, and even then, she drove for miles more, putting distance, asphalt, and other cars between herself and that place. Only then did the iron band around her chest loosen, allowing breath back into her lungs. Months have passed. The cabin is a memory shrouded in dread. Ilara never discovered the author of those notes, the silent watcher in the woods. She tries to rationalize it, to dismiss it as a twisted prank. Yet the feeling lingers, a cold residue of being observed, studied. Sometimes, late at night, when the world is quiet, she feels it again, an unseen gaze settling upon her, patient and persistent, as if something from those deep woods followed her out and waits even now. The windscreen wipers slashed futile arcs against the sheeting rain, a frantic metronome counting out the seconds Ilara lost to the storm. Through the smeared glass, the world dissolved into watercolor blues and grays. The road ahead, a rumor whispered by the drowned asphalt. Hours she'd driven, a fugitive from the bruised horizon, yet the tempest clung like a shroud. Lightning split the sky, a momentary blinding negative of the landscape, and in that stark flash, a weathered plank materialized. Oak Haven, 5 miles. A gasp, part relief, part exhaustion, escaped her lips. Shelter, perhaps. A pause in this liquid assault. But Oak Haven remained elusive, the miles swallowed by an ever-deepening fury. Rain hammered the roof, a deafening drum solo against the thin metal, visibility shrinking to mere arm's length. She crept forward, knuckles pale mountains on the steering wheel, then glimpsed through the deluge. A track, raw earth, bleeding into the verge, marked by a splintered sign promising a quicker way to Oak Haven. A tremor of doubt. Such paths, folklore warned, often led to mire and misdirection. Yet the main road felt like a river threatening to breach its banks, and the promise of speed, of arrival, was a siren song. Ilara wrenched the wheel, the car groaning as its tires bit into the yielding mud. For a time, the forest offered a fragile amnesty. Gnarled branches laced overhead, attempting to sieve the downpour, but the track narrowed, devolved into rutted sludge, sucking at the wheels. Deeper, she plunged into the dripping woods, a profound isolation settling upon her. No other lights, no sound but the storm's symphony and the engine's labor. Doubt curdled into certainty, a mistake, a grave one. Just as despair began to bloom, her headlights snagged on structure. A farmhouse, stark against the trees, venerable yet cared for, stood sentinel in a small clearing. Lamplight, warm and impossibly golden, spilled from its windows. A barn hunkered nearby, a silhouette against a churning sky. Relief surged, sharp and almost painful. Not Oakhaven, perhaps, but surely directions, a human voice. She killed the engine, the sudden silence amplifying the rain's roar. A deep breath, then a desperate sprint through the curtain of water to the porch overhang. Hand raised to knock, the door creaked inward. He stood framed in the opening, tall, sinewy, his face a map etched by wind and sun. His gaze held surprise, yes, but also an undercurrent she couldn't decipher. Wariness? Something I can do for you. His voice was rough timber. Forgive me, Ilara stammered, cold seeping into her bones, her teeth threatening a traitorous chatter. I was heading for Oakhaven. Took a wrong turn, I think, this storm. A flicker of something akin to pity crossed his features. Oakhaven, you're a fair piece from there, lass. That track you're on hasn't led anywhere since the floods took the bridge last spring. Her fragile hope fractured. Oh, is there another way? He shook his head, slow and final. Not tonight, not in this. These little lanes turn treacherous fast. Best you come inside, wait for it to blow over. Every nerve screamed caution, urged a polite refusal, a retreat back into the known chaos of the storm. But thunder cracked overhead, a violent punctuation mark, and the porch offered scant protection. Choice seemed an illusion. Thank you, she murmured, stepping over the threshold into the house's embrace. The air inside was thick with the scent of wood smoke and something else, something indefinably old. A living room unfolded, cluttered but strangely welcoming. Mismatched armchairs huddled near a hearth where flames danced, casting flickering shadows on walls adorned with sepia-toned photographs and curious arrangements of antique farming tools. She drifted towards the fire, drawn by its elemental comfort. Silas, the man offered, bolting the door against the tempest. The wife, Agnes, she's putting supper on. Rest yourself. I'll tell her we've company. He vanished down a dim corridor, leaving Ilara adrift in the room's quiet history. Her eyes snagged on the photographs, a family album displayed on the walls. Silas, a woman, Agnes presumably, and 2 children captured at various stages of life. Yet something jarred. The clothing, the hairstyles, they belonged to another era, decades past. She leaned closer, squinting at a particularly faded image, trying to resolve the details, when a soft voice startled her. Food's near ready. You'll join us, won't you? Agnes stood in the hallway entrance. Like Silas, time had weathered her, but her smile seemed genuine, etched around kind eyes. "Oh, I shouldn't impose," Ilara began, but Agnes waved a dismissive hand. "Fiddlesticks. We see few enough folk out this way. A new face at the table is a blessing." Ilara followed her into a kitchen radiating the aroma of roasting meat, a scent that awakened a fierce hunger she hadn't realized she possessed. Silas was already seated. Agnes indicated the chair opposite him. Conversation during the meal was sparse, strangely stilted. They answered her tentative questions with polite brevity, but volunteered nothing, their shared glances conveying silent, unreadable messages when she inquired about the town or neighbors. "Not much to say," Silas offered eventually, his gaze distant. "We tend to keep ourselves to ourselves." After the plates were cleared, Ilara's offer to help wash up was gently refused. "You're our guest," Agnes insisted. "Silas will show you the spare room. Morning will be soon enough to leave once this clears." Unease coiled tighter in Ilara's stomach as she followed Silas up the creaking stairs. The upper floor lay in shadow, navigated only by the beam of Silas's torch. He paused before a small door at the hall's end. "Washrooms just across," he indicated. "Give a shout if you need anything." As he made to withdraw, the question escaped her before she could stop it. "Where are your children?" Silas froze, his hand hovering over the doorknob. "Children?" His voice was carefully neutral. "The photographs," she clarified, her own voice small in the darkness. "Downstairs, 2 children." Silence stretched, thick and heavy. When he finally turned, his face was an unreadable mask in the torchlight's unsteady glow. "Those pictures," he said, his tone barely above a whisper, "are very old indeed. Sleep well." The door clicked shut, plunging her into absolute blackness. Her fingers fumbled for a light switch, found one, flipped it. Nothing. The storm must have claimed the power lines, she reasoned, trying to quell the frantic beat of her heart. She sank onto the edge of the bed, the mattress sighing beneath her. Something was deeply wrong here, a dissonance she couldn't articulate. Outside, the wind howled, rain lashing the glass like angry fists. Sleep felt impossible. The thought of remaining cocooned in this strange house until morning filled her with a nameless dread. Restless, needing motion, she slipped from the room, her phone's small light carving a path through the oppressive dark. The house groaned around her, settling deeper into the night. Drawn by an insistent curiosity, she descended the stairs again, towards the silent audience of photographs. In the stark, digital glare of her phone, they seemed even more unsettling. The faces within the frames blurred, indistinct, as if deliberately obscured. And behind the figures, in the shadowed corners of every scene, lurked a persistent, ill-defined darkness, almost a presence. A floorboard whispered behind her. Ilara spun, heart leaping into her throat. Agnes stood there, her features half lost in shadow. Can't find sleep? Her voice was oddly flat, devoid of inflection. I'm sorry, Ilara stammered, unnerved. I was just looking at the photos again. Agnes drifted closer, her eyes fixed on Ilara's face. Best not linger down here, she murmured. It isn't safe. Safe? What do you mean? Ilara took an involuntary step back. Agnes offered no answer, only continued her slow advance, her expression unnervingly serene. Ilara backed up further, colliding with a solid form. She turned to find Silas blocking the path to the stairs. I'm sorry, he said, and the regret in his voice sounded terrifyingly genuine. You've seen what you shouldn't. We can't let you go now. Pure panic ignited within her. She ducked beneath Silas's outstretched arm, scrabbling for the front door, rattling the knob, pushing against the solid wood, locked, bolted. Behind her, the measured tread of their footsteps approached. You don't see, Agnes was saying, her voice taking on a strange pleading quality. We're trying to keep you safe. The storm, it isn't natural. None of this is. Ilara fled, darting from living room to dining room, testing windows, searching for any egress. Each was secured fast. Silas and Agnes followed unhurried, their presence a closing net. What is it you want? She cried, finally cornered beside the cold kitchen hearth. Silas let out a long, weary sigh. We want nothing from you. We're caught, like you are now. This storm, it never truly ends. The night repeats. Always this night. That's impossible, Ilara whispered, but the denial felt hollow even as she spoke it. The wrongness she'd sensed, the temporal oddity hanging in the air, it resonated with his words. We hoped, Agnes said, her voice thin as dust. If we kept you here, maybe you wouldn't have to face what's out there, but it finds everyone. It always does. As if summoned, lightning flared, an incandescent pulse that bleached the kitchen white. In that blinding moment, Ilara saw them not as flesh and blood, but as hollowed silhouettes, empty spaces where people ought to be. Then darkness rushed back, and they were simply gone. The house itself seemed to tremble, its edges blurring, fading like breath on cold glass. She blinked, disoriented, the scent of ozone sharp in her nostrils. She was in her car, parked on the muddy track where the farmhouse had stood moments, or an eternity ago. Silence. The rain had ceased. Through the trees, the bruised edge of dawn painted the sky in tentative strokes of gray and rose. Her hands trembled violently as she turned the key, the engine catching with a reassuring roar. Carefully, painstakingly, she reversed, navigating the treacherous mud back towards the memory of the main road. Driving towards the faint promise of Oakhaven, the phantom farmhouse receded but did not vanish. Had it been real? A fever dream born of exhaustion and the tempest's fury? The questions echoed unanswered. Yet sometimes, on nights thick with rain, when the road stretches lonely and dark before her, a flicker in the rearview mirror reveals warm, inviting light spilling from the windows of an isolated house. And Alara presses down on the accelerator, eyes fixed firmly ahead, forever moving forward. Some shortcuts, she now knew, chart maps to places from which there is no true return, and some storms demand solitude. The aberrations announced itself with quiet finality. The door to the master suite stood closed. A simple thing, yet utterly wrong. In the 2 days since Alara had begun her tenure as caretaker for the absent Ashworths, that threshold had remained steadfastly open. Now her fingers hovered millimeters from the cool brass knob, a frisson of unease tracing its path up her spine, mocking the languid summer air. This house-sitting arrangement, procured to pad her meager student funds, felt increasingly surreal. The Ashworth estate wasn't merely large, it sprawled, an opulent behemoth, reclining across acres of emerald lawn and meticulously sculpted gardens. It whispered of inherited wealth, of generations accustomed to hushed footsteps on polished marble, a world away from Alara's reality of ramen noodles and library finds. "The place is yours, dear," Eleanor Ashworth had chirped, her laughter like wind chimes as she'd pressed the weighty keys into Alara's hand. Just refrain from any excessive revelry. As if Alara commanded legions eager to storm this fortress of antiques and silence. Her days had instead dissolved into a pleasant lethargy, navigating the labyrinthine streaming services on a screen the size of a gallery canvas, conducting reconnaissance missions into the Arctic depths of the sub-zero refrigerator. An easy commission, she'd thought. But the sight of that closed door banished ease. Drawing a breath that felt thin in her lungs, she turned the knob. Silent hinges yielded, unveiling the cavernous master bedroom. It presented itself as a tableau of undisturbed luxury. The monumental bed draped in a snowdrift of pillows, a chaise longue poised expectantly by the tall windows, portals leading to the walk-in wardrobe, and the ensuite's gleaming sanctuary. Yet the air itself felt disturbed, subtly rearranged. An invisible pressure pushed back, the unsettling sensation of stepping into a meticulously crafted forgery of a familiar space. Everything correct, yet fundamentally false. She shook her head, attempting to dislodge the tendrils of paranoia coiling in her gut. Too many late-night thrillers on that colossal screen, surely. She pivoted to leave, but halted. A fragrance, faint yet distinct, threaded the air, something botanical, exotic, entirely unlike the ghost of Mrs. Ashworth's signature scent clinging to garments within the closet. This was sharper, greener. Her pulse quickened, a frantic bird trapped beneath her ribs. Had someone trespassed? Her gaze swept the room, snagging on details. The heavy silver jewelry casket on the antique dresser, was it angled fractionally off? Hands betraying a tremor she couldn't quell, she lifted the lid. She possessed no expertise in gemology, yet the hoard glittering within, diamonds catching light like captured stars, pearls glowing with inner luminescence, screamed of staggering value, all apparently accounted for. Why would an intruder bypass such bounty? A sound from below, a floorboard's complaint? Ilara froze, straining. Impossible. She was utterly alone, save for the Ashworth's aloof's Persian cats, currently sunning themselves on the patio. The cleaners weren't scheduled for days. The Ashworths themselves were navigating the canals of Venice, not due back for a week's span. Then, undeniably, footsteps, someone moving through the cavernous kitchen downstairs. Panic surged, cold and sharp. Run, instinct screamed. Flee the house, dial the authorities. But a more treacherous impulse, the morbid curiosity that fuels countless cautionary tales, anchored her feet. She had to see. Descending the grand staircase, each step swallowed by the plush runner felt like wading through thickening dread. The sounds from the kitchen amplified, the delicate chime of crystal, the slide and click of cabinet doors. It mimicked, with chilling precision, someone preparing a refreshment. She risked a glance around the archway, her breath hitched, blood turning to ice water in her veins. There, silhouetted against the gleaming marble island, his back to her, stood a man she'd never encountered. Tall, impeccably dressed, in clothes that bespoke quiet expense, he seemed utterly incongruous with the act of unlawful entry. Perhaps she gasped. Perhaps a floorboard betrayed her presence. He turned unhurriedly. Their eyes locked across the expanse of polished stone. A moment stretched, taut and silent. Then, unsettlingly, he smiled, not a predator's baring of teeth, but something disconcertingly warm, almost welcoming. "Ah," he murmured, his voice a smooth baritone, cultured. "You'll be the young lady looking after the place. Can I offer you something?" Ilara remained rooted, her mouth slightly open, grappling with the sheer cognitive dissonance. A burglar offering hospitality in the house he'd infiltrated? Who are you? The words emerged, thin and unsteady. He chuckled, a low, sophisticated sound, lifting his glass in a small salute before taking a sip. An associate of the family, shall we say. Julian Ashworth and I share a considerable history. A frown creased Ilara's brow. Mr. Ashworth hadn't mentioned any associates possessing keys or carte blanche access. I don't think so, she countered, injecting a bravado she didn't feel. I should call the police. Her hand darted towards the phone, resting on a nearby counter, but his next words stopped her cold. I truly wouldn't recommend that, not unless you're prepared for Julian to learn about your own extracurricular activities. She froze, the blood draining from her face. How? She'd been meticulous, hadn't she? That brief, illicit exploration of Julian Ashworth's private study just 2 nights prior. The drawers slid open with guilty caution, the rustle of papers she had no right to see. She'd rationalized it as diligence, but a core of shame knew better. The man's smile returned, sharper now, tinged with ice. Oh, indeed. Your perusal of Mr. Ashworth's documents did not go unnoticed, nor did yesterday's rather spirited excursion in the Bentley. Tut, tut. What might the Ashworths make of such liberties? Her thoughts scattered like startled birds. How could he possess this knowledge? Unless... The realization struck with nauseating force. You've been watching me. He inclined his head, raising his glass again. Perceptive. Yes, I've maintained a certain oversight, ensuring the security of the Ashworths' various assets. But why? The question escaped as barely a whisper. Who are you? He placed his glass carefully on the counter, leaning back against the cool marble, his gaze pinning her. Let us simply say I possess a significant stake in the Ashworths' continued prosperity and in the preservation of certain delicate information. Ilara's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the sudden, profound silence. What sort of information? The sort, he stated, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial, dangerous murmur, that possesses the power to utterly dismantle a man like Julian Ashworth, the sort that warrants extreme measures to protect. A gasp escaped her lips. She took an involuntary step backward. You're blackmailing him? He shrugged, a gesture of startling nonchalance, though his eyes remained fixed on hers, unwavering. Such a crude term, consider it, a long-standing arrangement, mutually advantageous. It has functioned smoothly for quite some time. Her mind struggled to process the implications. The impeccable, affluent Ashworths, ensnared in some dark, hidden narrative. What abyss had she inadvertently stumbled upon? What happens now? She asked, hating the tremor that frayed the edges of her voice. His smile was devoid of warmth. Now, my dear Ilara, you face a decision. You can elect to erase this encounter from your memory, complete your house-sitting duties with diligence, collect your generous compensation, and depart with your equilibrium intact. Or, the word hung, pregnant with unspoken menace. Or what? She breathed. Or you embrace the role of the heroine, alert the authorities, unburden yourself to the Ashworths upon their return, but pause and consider. Whose narrative will hold sway? A trusted family confidant or a transient student discovered pilfering through private correspondence and misappropriating luxury vehicles? A wave of sickness washed over her. He was right. She possessed no tangible evidence, only his word against hers, and her own actions had irrevocably compromised her credibility. Even if the Ashworths entertained her story, her own transgressions would surface. So, he prompted softly, retrieving his glass, which path appeals? The one of least resistance, or the one fraught with complication? She stood paralyzed, caught in the crosscurrents of fear and conscience. The ethical imperative was unambiguous: expose him, regardless of the personal cost. Yet the primal urge for self-preservation screamed caution. In the end, neither courage nor cowardice dictated the outcome. Blind, dumb chance intervened. At that precise instant, beams of light sliced through the kitchen windows, sweeping across the polished floor. The crunch of tires on gravel drifted from the driveway. The man's eyes widened, a flicker of genuine surprise disrupting his composure. "Impossible," he muttered almost to himself. "Their itinerary..." But the unmistakable slam of car doors, followed by voices carrying the familiar cadence of Julian and Eleanor Ashworth, rendered his disbelief irrelevant. They were home, early. The ensuing pandemonium, the Ashworths' stunned disbelief at confronting an intruder, Ilara's fragmented attempts at explanation, the stranger's seamless, practiced falsehoods, dissolved into a messy confrontation. Truth, fractured and incomplete, eventually surfaced amidst tears, accusations, and murmured threats of litigation. Ultimately, a semblance of order prevailed. The man, whose identity remained elusive to Ilara, was taken into custody. The Ashworths' shadowed secrets, whatever their nature, retreated back behind the facade of their perfect life. And Ilara? Her house-sitting career concluded abruptly, but she departed richer in experience, carrying the indelible memory of that night and a stark lesson on the perils of unlocked doors and unchecked curiosity. Now, when passing imposing residences with their flawless lawns and sightless gleaming windows, she feels a familiar pang, a curiosity about the hidden dramas playing out behind those elegant walls. But the lesson holds fast. Some thresholds are best left uncrossed, some secrets best left undisturbed, for you can never predict when you might inadvertently step into the crossfire of someone else's perilous game. A sharp splintering sound tore through the morning's calm, a violence against the quietude. Across the small porch of the cabin, Lena and I stopped breathing, coffee mugs hovering, our eyes meeting in sudden shared alarm. We had sought refuge here, a deliberate vanishing from the clamor of existence. Yet the world, armed and unwelcome, had tracked us down. This was meant to be sanctuary, a secluded cabin swaddled in deep woods, miles from any signpost civilization, blessedly devoid of signal bars, serenaded only by the orchestra of the wild. Lena had unearthed it online, a spontaneous seizure of a long weekend. Precisely what we require, she'd declared, her gaze alight with anticipation. No demands, no intrusions, just us. My agreement had been swift, propelled by a desperate need to shed the weight of deadlines and the city's incessant hum. And for 36 hours, perfection had reigned. We'd explored winding trails, plunged into the glacial embrace of the lake, and surrendered hours to the porch swing, conversation flowing freely, laughter echoing as it hadn't in years. But that fragile bubble of peace disintegrated now, punctured by the indistinct murmur of voices filtering through the dense foliage. "You heard it?" Lena murmured, her mug landing on the rough-hewn table with a tremor she couldn't conceal. I inclined my head, thoughts scattering like startled birds. Benign hikers, perhaps? The cabin's caretaker making rounds? Yet an unnerving stillness had fallen over the woods, a palpable tension contradicting innocent explanations. This felt different, ominous. "Inside," I urged, my voice a low command. "Bolt the door. I need to see." Lena started to argue, but the argument died unspoken as a new sound sliced through the air, the cold, definitive snick of metal engaging metal, a firearm readied. Urgency propelled us. We melted back into the cabin's dim interior, easing the door shut with excruciating care. Through the window pane, figures materialized at the clearing's edge. Two men, clad in mottled camouflage, their features lost beneath dense beards and the shadows of wide-brimmed hats. "What now?" Lena breathed, the question barely audible. A helpless shake of my head was my only answer. Trapped. No cellar beneath, no clever escape route, just 4 timber walls and a ceiling that abruptly felt terrifyingly inadequate against the menace outside. They advanced, their dialogue becoming discernible. "Told you, saw something," one insisted, his voice tight with urgency. "Swear it looked like a person." "Can't be," the other countered gruffly. "No witnesses. Absolutely none." I traced a path down my spine. Witnesses? To what dark enterprise had our search for solitude led us? Lena's fingers tightened on my arm, directing my gaze toward the cabin's rear wall. A diminutive window punctuated the logs, barely adequate for passage, our sole prospect. We moved with the silence of predators, gathering essentials, phones, inert bricks without reception, a sturdy flashlight, a single bottle of water. While Lena wrestled with the stubborn window latch, my eyes swept the room for makeshift defense. They settled on a formidable cast-iron skillet suspended near the wood stove. Scant protection, yet infinitely better than empty hands. The window emitted a tortured groan as Lena forced it open, the noise amplified tenfold in the charged silence. We froze, straining to hear. Outside, the voices had ceased. "Go," I whispered, bracing myself to give her a lift. She navigated the aperture, landing with a muffled thump on the earth outside. I passed out our meager collection of supplies before beginning my own awkward egress. Halfway through, the cabin door crashed inward. "Hey!" barked a voice. "Got runners." Pure adrenaline detonated within me. I tumbled the rest of the way out, the rough sawn wood scraping my back raw. Lena hauled me upright, and then there was only flight. We plunged headlong into the embrace of the forest, branches lashing our faces, treacherous roots conspiring to snag our frantic feet. Behind us, the heavy crashing of pursuit, shouts receding slightly as we clawed for distance. We ran until our lungs felt scorched and our legs turned to waterlogged timber. Gasping, desperate for air, we finally collapsed behind the broad trunk of a fallen giant. Think we lost them," Lena panted, her face flushed, streaked with grime and sweat. I could only nod, speech momentarily beyond me. My mind churned, grappling with the impossible reality. Who were these men? What clandestine activity had we interrupted? And the most pressing question, how did we survive this? As our ragged breathing subsided, the forest cautiously reclaimed its voice. The tentative chirp of a bird, the sigh of leaves stirred by a breeze. It was almost feasible to dismiss the preceding half hour as a fever dream, but the profound ache settling into my muscles, the fear still coiling tight in my gut, screamed its veracity. Keep moving, I managed at last, my voice raspy. Find the road, a town, any place with help. Lena nodded, her eyes vast pools of fright. Which direction? I'm completely turned around. Force of habit made me retrieve my phone, still dead to the world, but the compass function flickered to life. The access road was east, I recalled. Heading that way should eventually intersect it. A flimsy strategy, but the only one available. We set off again, navigating the dense undergrowth with as much speed and stealth as we could muster. Every snapped twig, every rustle in the leaf litter brought us up short, hearts hammering against ribs. Each time, only a squirrel darting away, a bird taking flight. An eternity seemed to pass before a new sound reached us. The low, distant growl of an engine. Hope flared, fierce and sudden. An engine meant a road meant potential salvation. But as we cautiously approached the source of the sound, that fragile hope curdled, turning to ash. Peering through a screen of leaves, we saw a larger clearing, and within it, a scene that froze the marrow in my bones. A dozen men, at least, swarmed around several heavy-duty trucks. Crates were being unloaded, their contents obscured but easily imagined given the context. This wasn't some minor trespass. This was organized, equipped, and radiating extreme peril. I felt Lena stiffen beside me. We have to go, she whispered urgently, right now. Before we could retreat, a sharp cry pierced the air. Over there, movement. We bolted, stealth abandoned, caution discarded. We crashed through the wilderness, thorns tearing fabric and flesh, the forest floor a minefield of tripping hazards. Pursuit erupted behind us, shouts, the splintering percussion of bodies forcing through thick brush, punctuated by the chilling crack of gunfire that sent wood chips flying from nearby trunks. My lungs burned, legs screamed in mutiny, but raw terror fueled me, the image of capture eclipsing all pain. We burst from the tree line onto a rutted dirt track. To our left, it curved out of sight. To our right, perhaps 100 yards distant, a bridge arched over a deep, shadowed ravine. The bridge, Lena gasped. Maybe. Hide underneath. A gamble. If they searched beneath it, we'd be cornered. Yet the alternative, continuing this desperate flight, felt unsustainable. We sprinted towards the structure, the sounds of our hunters swelling ominously close. Reaching the edge, I helped Lena scramble down the precipitous embankment, then slid and stumbled after her into the cool, dim space beneath the bridge deck. We pressed ourselves flat against the cold concrete pier, struggling to muffle our tortured breaths. Above, the heavy tread of boots pounded on the wooden planks. Voices echoed, sharp and searching. Couldn't have gone far. Spread out. Check the woods across the river. Maybe they went down the embankment. My heart threatened to seize, but then a different voice, clipped with authority and impatience, cut through the noise. No time for this. Buyers due any minute. If they ran, they ran. Deal with it later. Everyone back to the trucks, now. Muttered dissent followed, but soon the voices receded, replaced by the growl of engines revving, then fading into the distance. We remained huddled in the shadows for what felt like an age, silence stretching taut between us. Only when the forest had settled back into profound quiet did I risk a whisper. Think they're gone. Lena nodded, her face pale, etched with tear tracks I hadn't seen fall. So what do we do? I drew a deep, unsteady breath, forcing clarity through the fog of fear and exhaustion. Follow the road, I decided. Stay in the tree line parallel to it, out of sight. It has to lead somewhere eventually. A highway, a town. It remained a desperate prayer disguised as a plan. As we climbed back towards the road's edge, the stark reality of our predicament assaulted me anew. Lost, hunted by ruthless criminals, utterly cut off. Our survival now hinged on instinct, endurance, and a significant measure of luck. Yet looking at Lena, seeing the resolve hardening in her eyes beneath the fear, I found a fragile spark of hope. We faced this together, and together somehow we had to find a way through. We began walking, keeping the concealing trees between us and the empty road. Each step carried us further from the nightmare unearthed in the woods, and closer, I prayed, to safety. But I understood, with chilling certainty, that the true ordeal was only just beginning. Even if we escaped this wilderness, we carried a lethal secret, one that dangerous men would silence at any cost. Our serene weekend escape had irrevocably transformed into a primal struggle for existence, a struggle I was fiercely determined to win.